Even though I had read all of the books and finished my degree in counseling, there was something that I had learned in my 7th year of marriage that transformed my marriage from a good marriage to a great marriage. And that's what I want to share with you today. If you've been raised in church for any amount of time, you've heard about the order of the home, where it's Christ and then the husband, the wife, and the children. And the way that it is set up is so wise because everything gets done by the right person who was designed specifically for that purpose. And there's no two-headed monster. But when it comes to daily living and how we implement that, there's one secret. And it is the first thing you need to learn to know now and start practicing in your life now to make it easier when that day comes, Lord willing, for you to be the wife in your own home. Outside of pleasing God and pleasing Christ, I believe that the best part of marriage is having a best friend. Somebody who, when they come home from work, you can tell them all your thoughts and your dreams or the boring things, or just listen to him and what's gone in his day and the things he's thinking of and the things that he's excited about. Having someone to sit with quietly and say nothing, just knowing that they're there and they are your friend. And while that's the best part of marriage, for me, I believe the scariest part of marriage is the area of where your marriage is headed, where your family is headed, the decisions that are made each and every day. They affect our security, and it's scary to watch your husband fail, or what you think is failing, and knowing that you as a wife and your children and the long-term outcome of your family will be directly impacted because of his choices. But even scarier than that is something that I had to deal with. I would never say that I was the type of wife that would try to boss my husband around. And if he told me no, I would back down and just move on. But I have a visionary personality, and I love to plan, I love to organize. It's one of my favorite things. And early in our marriage, and this isn't what this video is about, it's just a side story, but earlier in our marriage, we were kind of in a stopping point where it seemed like a decision needed to be made. And so, as is my personality, I researched the problem, I thought it through, I figured out a great answer, and I just presented it all to my husband. I said, hey, doesn't this look like it'll work out? Doesn't this look like it's great? And he said, yeah, that's a great idea. And we went for it. And it was the wrong decision. And it impacted us for a very long term. And whenever we would go back to that point, I knew that it was because I had led our family. I didn't bully. I wasn't nagging. I wasn't trying to boss him around. I was in my heart submitted to him. But I wasn't allowing the Lord to lead him. It was as if the Lord was leading him through me. And women are easily deceived. And had I been more patient and, well, let's just say that to me the scariest part of marriage is when the wife goes outside of that order of leadership and then has to face the consequences. But the hardest part of marriage is shutting up. I know that doesn't sound nice, but it's true. If we could learn to just shut up, and I'm not talking in a passive-aggressive, well, I didn't talk to him for 3 days. I'm not talking about the cold shoulder of manipulation. I'm just talking about the number one thing you need to learn and prepare in your own life to be a good wife. Rather than speaking up, tell it to Jesus alone. So let me tell you my story and how I came to this. My husband is a great guy. I am so thankful that I chose him, and I have no regrets. He is my best friend. But there are, or have been, a couple of things throughout our entire marriage where I felt he was making bad decisions that would impact my security long term. And so I would try to be helpful, and I would, early in the marriage, I would set out these plans. I feel like if we did this would overcome these particular issues, or here's a plan for success, and here's a plan that will work. And while he may have agreed, it wasn't his idea. He wasn't fully persuaded in and of himself. And if he was persuaded, he wasn't at a point where he wanted to change or felt like he could change. And I was going through what I call the dark days. And if you watch my video of how to deal with the voices in your head, I talk about that a little bit. There were just a lot of things going on all at one time. It was just these layers of learning and growth. And I was reading the book, The Power of a Praying Wife. And in it, one of the first things she said is you need to accept your husband the way he is, and if he will never change. And I just thought, nope, I will never be able to be happy if this never changes. I cannot accept him the way that he is. And God smote my heart, and he said, so I'm a liar? So you're saying that if you delight yourself in me and your husband doesn't change on these areas, you will never be happy? So I had to renew my mind with the truth of God's word and submit to him and say, all right, Lord, if I delight myself in you, you will give me the desires of my heart. If the desires of my heart do not hinge upon my husband changing, then they hinge on something that you know that I don't know. And what I did is that I started to trust God. Rather than praying that my husband would do this and this and this and this and everything would be better, I started praying, Lord, please make him into the man that you want him to be in your timing. And Lord, help me to delight myself in you and trust in you. So I committed to shut up. Whenever those issues came up, and fear and doubt and frustration and insecurity would fill my soul and remove my meek and quiet spirit, I would go back to the Bible. And if you've heard me for any length, you'll know that 1 Peter 2 and 3 are my go-to scriptures for the right spirit of a wife. But what really struck me was when I was reading and it said, the meek and the quiet spirit is of great price in the eyes of the Lord. But the how of that, he said that the holy women who trusted in God, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham. And if you know the story of Sarah and Abraham, there were times when he took her twice to Egypt and lied and said that she was his sister, and she was taken away to be the wife of another man. And yet she obeyed, trusting in God, and you know what? He took care of her. And that is where we struggle as women. Do we really believe that God is more powerful than our voice? And I know that in our head we say, yes, God is more powerful than us. But do we believe that God can move the hearts of men all by himself? Think about Hudson Taylor and how that was one of the big areas that he purposefully struggled and grew in before he went to the mission field. And he chose to not speak up about his needs, even his financial needs. He just entrusted them in the Lord. And that helped build his ministry long term, a debt-free, cash and carry, just praying about your needs ministry. I think about George Mueller, the same thing. He would not bring his needs to anybody but the Lord. And you can see the testimony of what God did because of that faith. And that is the faith that a wife needs. Tell it to Jesus alone. And so for that year, when something would happen, I would just kind of walk away to go pray. And my husband, he is a really nice guy, and he knew my disposition changed, and he would say, are you okay? And I, rather than telling him what he was doing that I felt was going to have bad consequences, I just said, you know what? It is not you. It's me. I am struggling trusting the Lord. I just need some time to pray. And that time in prayer transformed me and gave me such peace. It didn't change my husband. It changed me. And God's promises are true. Delight thyself in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. I did see my husband grow and mature and lead. I say it was the year his shoulders kind of broadened, and he really gained that fullness of the spiritual leader of our home. But he didn't know I had made that decision. It was my own choice, and I didn't say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to change it. This is what I'm hoping to see in you. No, I just kept it to myself, and on our 7th anniversary, he came and he said, you know what? Hasn't this been just the best year of marriage? You are the best wife. You're so wonderful. You're my best friend. I'm so glad that I've married you. He said, I'm just overflowing with love for you. And it smote my heart, because I knew what had changed that year. I knew why he was feeling love for me, because I had allowed him to be the man and the head, and I had accepted him as he was. It wasn't my business to change him. And during that year, God had shown me, Melissa, this is an area in your life that you need to change. But do you know how long I've been working with you on this? And do you know how long suffering and merciful when you fail? And yet you want other people to change so quickly. You see, it was my impatience and my lack of faith that were keeping me from being the wife that God wanted me to be. Right now in your life, what you can do to prepare to be a good wife and to master this #1 thing that it takes to be a good wife is to look at your authority or your situations. Maybe you disagree with your parents on something. Maybe you feel you too would never be happy unless something changed. I would encourage you to, rather than trying to change people and change circumstances, delight yourself in the Lord and ask him to mold your desires to his desires and to change the circumstances as he pleases to make you more like Christ. And you won't regret it. Have a great day.